Welcome back to our CBSN Originals, Powerless, the High Cost of Cheap Gas. Many landowners think they own their land, but if you only have surface rights and not mineral rights, what happens on your land may be out of your control. We spoke with Alan Collins, a professor of resource economics and management at West Virginia University. He explains the complexities of land ownership.
You buy property, it's a bundle of rights. And one of those rights that you have here in our country is that you're able to extract the minerals from property. Many people, however, over time sell off or inherit a different bundle of rights. So the rights that you own for the surface aren't necessarily the same as the rights you own for the minerals. They can be separated, and in the state of West Virginia are often separated. West Virginia has a long history of people selling off minerals and also timber rights, separate from the land rights that they own. And so not every state has as many split estates as the state of West Virginia does.
So, Professor, how common is it then for the rights of a person's property to be split? I know in West Virginia, is it becoming more and more common?
Well, our research, we looked at drilling for Marcellus shale gas wells. And based on that research, what we found is about just under half, about 45% of those wells were drilled on split estates. In other words, the surface was owned by one party and the mineral rights were owned by another party. And so it's reasonably common here in this state to have a splitting of rights between surface and mineral.
And who takes precedence then? The owner of the surface rights or the owner of the mineral rights?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on the state that you're in, and some states have different sets of rules and regulation. Typically for the state of West Virginia, that would be reasonable access. In other words, the mineral right holder has reasonable access to extract those minerals.
But I could
Again, what is reasonable is often a court decision.
I was going to say, because I can imagine if you're a surface right owner happily enjoying your property and all of a sudden the mineral rights owner comes in with lots of big trucks and starts digging, you might not be so happy about that.
That's correct. Now in West Virginia we do have some protections. There is a compensation, a $2,500 compensation that is given for surface damages. There's also some setbacks, certain distances from houses and so forth. So there are some protections, but other states, for example, Colorado and New Mexico, have a broader range of protections for just surface owners.
Professor Collins, can you tell us about your research? What exactly are you looking into there in West Virginia?
So the research project that I was involved in was actually completed about 6 years ago. And what we did, we did a survey of surface owners who had Marcellus gas wells drilled on their property. And we divided that group of the survey into two groups. One group had a split estate. They owned the surface, but someone else owned the mineral rights. And the other group owned both the mineral and surface rights. And what we did is compare the two groups in terms of their issues or problems with drilling. What we found is that those people with split estates had more problems with the drilling than those people that owned both the mineral and surface rights.
And why was that?
Without owning the mineral rights, you as a surface owner don't have as much leverage in negotiation of where that well is going to be located, what the terms of the operation is going to be, when the drilling is going to occur, etc. With the ownership of the mineral rights, you have a little bit more leverage as to when those operations are going to occur.
How do most people end up selling their mineral rights? Does someone come to their door, knock on the door and say, would you like to make some money by selling me your mineral rights today?
That's really a complicated question, and it depends on the situations. Some are just inheritance issues, so you have many children, you give some children the surface, you give other children the mineral rights. So there's inheritance, there's some selling off, and based on some of the readings that I did in the history of West Virginia, some of it's just outright fraud where people were essentially swindled out of their mineral rights. And so it's all sorts of different situations would result in the separation of those two rights.
And those people who were swindled, do they have any kind of legal recourse, do you know?
We're talking back in the 1800s now here, so I don't know that. I think it's a little past any statute of limitations there.
Right now in West Virginia, are the mineral rights worth much more than surface rights for the most part?
I haven't really looked at that issue too much. I would suspect that in many cases the mineral rights are much more valuable than the surface rights, given the ability to extract a lot of resource from these Marcellus shale gas wells.
And in terms of mineral rights and those who more recently sold their mineral rights, do you think that they fully understood what they were doing and what they might be getting themselves into?
As someone that's interested in buying rural lands, this is lands outside of city limits, you need to be very careful about who owns the mineral rights and what their status is.
Absolutely. And what were some of the conclusions of your research that you drew?
One, that split estates did increase the number of problems that surface landowners experienced from drilling of Marcellus shale gas wells. But just being a split estate alone wasn't the main driving problem. There were other problems. In other words, when you had a resident that depended upon groundwater for their water supply, or when the neighbors complained, or when you thought there wasn't adequate compensation, all those factors led to there being more problems being perceived by the surface owner in the drilling of the natural gas.
Now, besides the nuisance that some of these surface owners have had to face with having their land drilled, were there other environmental concerns that came up in your research?
A little bit. Again, our focus here was primarily on the landowners that had wells drilled on their property. But quite a few of the landowners, particularly those that had split estates, noted truck traffic was a big issue. And truck traffic not only affects the landowner where the gas well is, but also the surrounding community as well.
Now, industry officials say that horizontal drilling is allowing them to sort of minimize the impact. Did you notice that at all in your research?
We looked at both vertical and horizontal wells, and horizontal wells did cause more problems than vertical wells. Again, what we did not look at is the fact that horizontal wells, you can do a lot more drilling in one well pad, and so that would limit the number of wells that are drilled on separate pads, but it's hard to say whether that limits the problem or not.
Oh, so how then were the horizontal wells causing more problems?
Well, again, for a horizontal well, there is more of an industrial operation going on in terms of the drilling that's going on and the subsequent fracking afterwards. There's more blowback water that comes out, and so there's more water storage issues that occur with a horizontal well. And also you can put more wells in one well pad, and so that leads to more issues in that regard.
So you would not agree that horizontal wells minimize an environmental impact?
I really have not studied that issue enough to really say. I know that from our survey, the horizontal wells led to more perceived problems of surface owners than vertical wells.
All right. Well, Professor Collins, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for watching our CBSN Originals. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with the rest of the day's news. You're streaming CBSN, CBS News, always on.